It's time to do some summer cleaning on your fantasy roster. No more waiting. No more panicking. Should we hold? Should we trade? Should we? No. These guys have had it. It's time to cut these guys from your fantasy baseball team and don't look back. I'll start with a guy that I'll admit a few weeks ago I said, be patient, don't panic. This is somebody who could turn it around, and it's not happening. It doesn't look like it's going to happen for MJ Melendez of the Kansas City Royals. Have to acknowledge the fact that, look, a lot of the appeal here is just the fact that he qualifies as catcher. Even though he doesn't really play catcher anymore, that's a position that's always hard to get production from. He's somebody who hits the ball hard. He's a young player, young, exciting offense, except it's not exciting. This team is just not very good. The Royals are 28th in total runs scored, 23rd in team average, and they just lost one of their best young players, Vinny Pasquantino, for the season. I mean, things aren't getting better here. It's just going to get worse. They're going to maybe call up some more prospects, struggle through another losing season, and Melendez isn't doing any favors for anybody. One thing I pointed to was the fact that he had a really good hard hit rate. He was making quality contact. Then there's the fact that he's just not making nearly enough contact. His strikeout rate wasn't terrible last year. It's gotten a lot worse this year. He's up to a 30.8% strikeout rate, one of the worst. And you know what? Should have realized that even though last year he did hit 18 home runs, he was showing that power, but he only had a 217 batting average. He hasn't done any better. He has a 211 average this year. The power sometimes just doesn't outweigh the lack of production everywhere. If the average stinks, the runs aren't going to be there, the RBI opportunities really aren't going to be there, and you're not getting speed here. Being a catcher just isn't enough. Look, it's time to part ways. This is a guy who will hit the occasional home run, but right now, at least, it doesn't look like he's going to really help your fantasy team. Well, now there's a guy who's the complete opposite. He doesn't strike out that much. His expected batting average is in the 83rd percentile, and in just the month of June alone, he's hitting 357. But you know what? I don't care. Brian Hayes has finally started to get some hits, but you know what? They aren't extra base hits, and they definitely aren't clearing the fence, because on the season, he only has 4 home runs in 290 plate appearances. You know, he kind of fooled us a couple years ago when he first came up as a rookie. In just 85 at-bats, he had 5 home runs, 7 doubles, and even 2 triples. You know, some prospect hounds were big on Hayes, but more of a defensive guy. He was known as a glove-first prospect, not really supposed to be a power hitter, and all of a sudden he was flashing all these extra base hits as soon as he came up. Well, I guess that was just a mirage. Actually kind of funny, if you look at his career trajectory, that very short sample, 5 home runs, and then the next season in about half a year worth of at-bats, 6 home runs, and then next year 7 home runs. Guess how many home runs he's on pace for this year? That's right, we're going 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 8, baby. It's clear that there isn't going to be any help in the power department. And you know what? Despite the fact that you can say the average is coming around, all he's done is bring his season average up to 255. Let's stop waiting around for the breakout, for the power to return. It really wasn't there in the first place. Now I'm going to talk about some pitchers that you might want to consider dropping. But first, let me tell you that if you are playing DFS or interested in trying it for baseball, Rival Fantasy is the place to do it. They have contests that you won't see anywhere else, including a fantasy bingo card that you can play all week and win multiple times and draft a whole team of players, or head-to-head challenges, and the easiest pick'em game that you can imagine where you can win just like that. So click the link below, join me. You can get a deposit match up to $200 just for signing up, plus a free play voucher. Join rival.com/endgamemlb. Just use that code endgamemlb if you go to Rival Fantasy. Try it out today and you won't be sorry. I know it's hard to find some quality starting pitching these days, but just because a guy's been there and even been successful doesn't mean that you have to keep him around. Let's look at what you've done for me lately, Chris Bassett. It's kind of fitting that he's with the Blue Jays wearing all blue because his StatCast profile is pretty blue. Now, he was amazing in the beginning part of May. If you look, he had 3 straight shutouts that spanned 7, 9, and 7 innings. But being 34, maybe he used up all his juice for the season in that month, because since then, his outings keep getting shorter and shorter, and he's getting hit harder and harder. One look at his rolling hard hit percentage and barrel rate. it's getting ugly. He's giving up a lot more home runs lately. Remember, his best seasons when he really started to emerge were in Oakland. Far more pitcher-friendly venue. Going to Toronto, you knew that he might have some issues. Well, it's been more up and down, but right now it's definitely down, and you've got to be concerned most of all, I think, with the shortness of those outings. His last two have been 3 innings and 3 1/3. He's getting hit harder and not going deep into games. This is already a player that isn't helping you a ton in strikeouts. Never been a guy who's going to whiff a ton of batters. I'd say maybe you should sell high. It might be too late for that, though. You really don't have to keep him around. I kind of find it hard to believe he's rostered in 86% of Yahoo leagues at the moment. He doesn't have to be. And then, you know what? There's a pair of pitchers who are on one of the best teams in baseball, and they both don't belong on fantasy teams. Let's start with Dane Dunning. That's right, former first-round pick from the Florida Gators. You know, talk about Bassett not really being a high strikeout pitcher. You already knew this from Dunning, right? This is a guy who is definitely far from a flamethrower. Averages about 91 on his fastball. That's okay if you have the control, you know how to find the zone and manipulate hitters into hitting ground balls. Dunning has done that. He's had some really good starts. His ratios have been really good this season, actually. I mean, a 2.78 ERA, pitches for the Rangers, one of the best teams, going to get some wins there. What is there really to worry about? How about the complete lack of strikeouts? I mean, he's never been a guy who get a ton of strikeouts, but he's at a career low, not even 15% K rate. And that's backed up by an 8.2% swinging strike rate. For reference, the major league average is 11%. He's not fooling hitters. He's going to depend on his defense, which is good, but eventually that will catch up to you. That really good ERA I mentioned, it might be kind of a mirage. He's pitching to a 5.07 expected ERA and a 4.89 SIERA. When the strikeouts aren't there and a guy is getting by on a lot of luck, basically, that's a recipe for disaster. He can have one of those starts that just completely obliterates his and your ratios. Which leads me to Martin Perez, also the Rangers. I've talked about his guy for the last couple of years and just said, don't bother. Why do fantasy owners keep bothering with him? He's rostered in more than half of Yahoo leagues, just like Dunning is. I guess because he's on a winning team, but you need to pitch well to win. He's really not even doing that. He's pitching to a decent ERA, but a 1.45 whip. He has allowed the 7th most hits among all qualified pitchers right now. And all 6 of the guys above him have pitched more innings, some a lot more innings. And like Dunning, Perez, only a 16% K rate. That's for his career, and this year's not any better. He's not getting his strikeouts. He's depending on his defense and the fact that he's going to keep the ball low in the zone and avoid getting hit hard. It's just asking to be lit up. And then I know you might be desperate for saves, aren't we all at some point? But here's a guy with 8 saves and a decent ERA at 3.77 that you can definitely cut ties with right now. Giovanni Gallegos of the St. Louis Cardinals. Yeah, Cardinals, love playing musical chairs at closer. Well, right now, Ryan Helsley, who's been really good again this year, he's hurt. And Gallegos, he already has 8 saves like I mentioned. He's picked up some here and there, and he's been pretty good for his career, and he can strike out at least a batter per inning. But at this point, it's definitely bad news that, number one, he blew a save the other day versus the Giants, and then immediately afterwards, he didn't get the ball. You remember Jordan Hicks? That's right, Jordan Hicks, the guy who can throw over 100 and cannot stay on the mound because he's always blowing his arm out. Well, he's back, and he had been a converted starter for a while, an opener. I guess now he's back to being closer because for 3 straight days he picked up a save. It looks like he's the guy. Even if something happens to Hicks, Helsley won't be out that long. Gallegos at this point, I mean, you've got to be either in a league that counts holds or a really deep league or just really desperate to get some saves, maybe late in the season. No, just forget it. Gallegos, he's not worth holding. I'm not holding on to any of those guys in my fantasy leagues. These are some players, though, you might want to consider picking up.